What did the weird kid at your school do to earn that reputation? Made plastic weapons with various school supplies, so he could shoot stuff at people. The weird part is he shot them at the other outcast kids. While he's probably a successful engineer at this point, I did get the pleasure to see one of the math nerds slap the crap out of him in retaliation once. Kicked his wooden clogs at kids that bullied him for wearing clogs. He had pretty good aim. He would unwrap condoms, fill them with yogurt, and leave them around the school. He used to sit in puddles to get sent home. Then the school realized and stopped sending him home. He carried on regardless. The weird kid at my high school got into an argument with a pretty popular kid. Population guy wanted to fight. Weird kid told him that if he wins, then he gets to keep popular guy's thumbs. They didn't fight. Had a German foreign exchange student that dressed like Willy Wonka and carried around pies. For a while I thought the only English he knew was, "Do you like pie?" He was weird as crap, but always smiling, and the pies were good. He had a walking stick that he didn't need and claimed it had a sword in it. We all believed him for about a week until he started claiming only the worthy could pull it after we tried to get him to show us. Always wore a different shoe on each foot, smelled terrible, and never brought a lunch. This was a Catholic school that cost a decent amount of money. Turns out he was just really, really poor. Everybody looked out for him afterward. Another girl was 12 and pregnant, and her mom was 24. Her baby daddy then killed a 7-Eleven clerk with a shotgun and made national news because he said he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone. He baked a cake for the class. It was nobody's birthday or anything. The weird kid just baked a cake and brought it in. The teacher confiscated the cake and brought it to the teacher's lounge instead of throwing it away. Another teacher had a slice and had the kid's pubic hair baked into the cake. Never saw that kid again. She used to have longish hair. One day, she decided to get a pixie cut. Nothing too unusual so far. What made it strained, however, was that before cutting her hair, she had braided it into a thick, neat braid and brought it to school. That day, she tucked the braid under her beanie and went around to every teacher and acquaintance, asking them to pull her hair. Those who complied were met with a surprising twist. They'd end up holding the braid in their hand, while she burst out laughing, cracking up as loudly as possible. Kept pooing himself in class. She had neurodivergence issues. A bunch of other girls had a bulletin board outside the classroom where they always hung out and posted notes and crude drawings making fun of how other people, including her, dressed and acted like Facebook bullying, but before social media was invented. The school turned a blind eye to this until one day she took a lighter and set the board on fire. Then the school suddenly cared a lot and she was expelled. Dude ate a lunchbox of ground coffee every day for lunch. No drink, just the powder. And this was at 9 years old. I still sometimes wonder if he survived childhood. Dale wore only black t-shirts and camo pants every day. Had bug eyes and was small even for a 5th grader. At our annual required school play he chose, in front of the entire school, to play the kid who gets hypothermia. He stumbled all over the stage stripping off his clothes because he was so hot and the teachers couldn't catch him. He fell off the stage into the kindergartners with his pants around his ankles when he finally dramatically died. Legend. He used to eat Millbone dog treats. Had a tail, a clip-on one. Obsessed with tactical gear / backpacks and flashlights. He's a janitor now. I was friends with the kid in grade school, Joe. Joe was losing his baby teeth. He had a crush on this one girl, Carla. He ran up to her in the playground to show her how loose his front teeth were. She called him gross. So he punched himself in the mouth and knocked out 2 of his baby teeth. He then chased Carla with his teeth clamped in his tiny, bloody fist, screaming, "How do you like me now?" He was my hero. He was sent home. The next day, he came back to school with the 2 teeth in a tiny box. He was later sent home for shooting the teeth through a straw at things during class. He would retrieve the teeth, rinse, repeat. What a menace. He is now a MD, happily married, but not to Carla. He was into anime when that was very much seen as for losers. He always wore a Sailor Moon shirt during a middle school dance. The last song of the night was My Heart Will Go On, which I guess was his favorite song, and he started slow dancing with his arms around an imaginary partner. I hope he's had a good life. Theater kid who wore a bowler hat all day, every day for a year. Dressed and styled his hair like an emo kid, but would get really mad if you called him an emo kid because he hated that music. It was me. I was the weird kid. Could you tip your head and roll your bowler hat down your arm and catch it? Because during my bowler phase, I could. We had a kid who used to hiss at people if they got too close to him. He'd randomly meow during class too. I think he was just really into cats, but it definitely made him stand out. We had a kid that would casually snack on crayons for dessert after he had eaten his lunch. That kid is a lance corporal now. Attended a special education school that welcomed kids with various challenges, from mild dyslexia to severe mental illness. Overall, it was a positive experience. Small classes, attentive teachers, and just regular kids being kids despite our different needs. But there was one classmate I'll never forget. He appeared in our grade suddenly one day and immediately stood out with his unique behavior. Some of his memorable antics included sitting completely upside down in his chair during class, which the teacher oddly never addressed, creating an elaborate artwork using correction fluid Tipp-Ex on the principal's window in full view of the entire school during recess. He only stayed at our school briefly. Years later, I was surprised to spot him on television. He was getting a haircut and having a rather strange conversation with the barber. Looking back, I wonder what became of him. Oh, I got a doozy. So lots of the weird kid over the years, but I sat next to a kid in computer science in like 10th grade who was congenial enough. But his story's plot just thickened and thickened and thickened over the years. He was a stocky redhead kid with long hair that made me think of a lion's mane. He was usually pretty reserved, but easy to irritate, and on one or two occasions, he got made fun enough to explode. He started screaming about a condition called blood vision, where he loses all control and tears apart everyone around him. When people would laugh at him, he'd storm out, saying it was for everyone's protection. I kind of felt bad for the guy. I was a semi-popular dude and tried to extend a helping hand by asking him questions about things he was into and about a condition. He said it was a congenital defect that plagued him all his life, and that it was passed down from his mom, but that it helped him with his duties as a werewolf hunter. I dialed back on the questions and kept an arm's length, but I really was careful about not pissing the dude off because this was post-Columbine, and he had that 1,000-yard stare. Anyway, after that semester, I didn't see much of him. We'd nod politely in the hallway, but I ended up in a class with his goth sister, and wouldn't you know it, she was a vampire hunter. I didn't get close with her, but I remember overhearing her go into great detail about her sacred duties, and how she was the only one keeping everyone safe. Then, one day, I'm doing the office assistant extracurricular thing, and the office has glass walls all around, and commotion starts outside. People are gathering around, and I can't see who's in the middle, so I go to see if I can scope it out, but the AP told me to sit still and lock the door from the inside. I eventually see that the dude was getting wailed on by some other kid, and the sister was on the side, yelling with her eyes closed, presumably casting spells. Security there. Kids hauled off to their respective offices. Calamity dies down. And then, I shit you not, their dad shows up for him in a fucking wizard cloak and weird hat. He had a shortish gray beard and walked with a weird gaunt. I only saw him for a second from my AP's office, but I wasn't the only one, and we all talk about it for weeks. I don't remember if that's the last time I saw him or her, but shortly after they were both gone from the school. I always felt bad wondering how freaking awful their childhoods and subsequent lives must have turned out being raised by that probable lunatic. She sat in a bush and growled at people that walked by. We called her Bush Girl or the Bush Monster if she were growling. Arizona never changed. Ours was a kid who liked to take his shirt off and shotgun, punching a hole in a can and chugging it. Sodas on our school bus like he was at a frat party. Years later, I took a job as a cook in a cafeteria. My manager said he hoped I stayed longer than the last guy who liked celebrating the weekend by slamming back sodas after poking a hole in them with a kitchen knife. Incredulously, I asked the guy's name. Yep, it was the Pepsi party animal himself. Some people never change. Put his hands down the front of his pants, rifle around in there, pull out his hands, and wave them in your face asking the girls want to smell. Pretty sure he grew up to be a legit incel still in mom's basement. I wouldn't expect anything less from behavior like that. 14-year-old kid put alligator clips on the end of 2 wires, attached them to his shirt, then jammed both wires into an electrical outlet during science class. I'll never forget time slowing down during that moment. I saw 2 sparks slowly travel up the wire over the course of about 5 seconds. I remember the panic on his face as the sparks were approaching, the panic on the teacher's face when he saw it. The sparks hit the kid, and all the lights went out in the building momentarily. The lights flickered a few times, and the kid dropped to the floor. The kid managed to rip the clips off of himself and out of the sockets. He then stood up and looked at the teacher terrified, mainly because he thought he was going to be in trouble. The kid went to hospital and was absolutely fine. But yeah, freaking mad lad. We had a weird kid that would do anything that he was dared to. Although I never saw it, the story was he was dared to eat a frog's iron biology class, full of formaldehyde. We all believed it at the time, not so sure anymore. That happened to me. I bet a kid $10 that he wouldn't eat the fish eye. He did. And we both got suspended from the class for the rest of the year. It was the end of the year class project, so only a few days. I also had to pay him $10 because I felt bad and he was a lot bigger than me. The assistant principal said it was the stupidest reason he ever suspended someone. Made his own chainmail and wore it to school often. He wore it once, and anyone who was even remotely artistic or crafty or interested in fantasy/gaming gave him attention that he normally never got, and so he just wore it all the time, but the positive attention stopped like day 3. So I went to a very, very, very fancy/elite prep school, like top 10 in the country, multiple presidents attended, etc. New England, yada yada. When I went there, they were going through a bit of a we are the cool school stage and had eliminated the dress code. No more coat, and tie you could basically wear anything. Sweats even. This change had happened about 8 years earlier, so nobody currently enrolled had attended when there was a dress code. First day of 9th grade, a new kid shows up in a coat and tie. Nobody has any clue why. Did he not know? I mean, it's a day/boarding school, so he must have seen the other kids. Anyway, he took a fair amount of crap in day 1. Day 2, wearing a coat and tie. Day 3, same thing. Then it escalated. For anyone who has ever been to a fancy prep school with coat and tie, what it actually means is tan/stone khakis, cornflower blue button-down, and blue blazer with penny loafers and a school tie. Then take the outfit and ball it up for a few weeks and put it on. I mean, everyone looks awful. Anyway, the escalation was 3-piece suits. Then 3-piece suits with bowler hats and pocket watches. Then on a random Friday, he is wearing a freaking tux. Armani, if I remember. Anyway, this went on for 4 freaking years. I think he's a doctor now. Ripping braces off in hallway before classes started. Then he had butted the biggest bully without hesitation when the dude tried making fun of him. Ended up becoming really popular. Pepsi boy. Kid came to high school and wore a Pepsi t-shirt every single freaking day from 9th graduation. The weird thing was he wasn't poor. He just liked a freaking Pepsi shirt. He wore his long black hair in braids and later dreads. He was white, played in the school band and a little outside of school too. Dude was always carrying around a 2-liter of Faygo in his back pocket that he drank all day late 90s. JNCOs were his thing. He was super dorky until halfway through 10th grade and just randomly changed. But people still didn't like him because it was a super homogeneous school and he was like an alien there compared to all the other kids. He just sort of started doing really bizarre stuff after that, like eating slices of cheese he pulled out of his pants, not his pockets, his pants, and saying, this one tastes a bit nutty, or pulling these really old-timey practical jokes like hand buzzers, sneezing powder, etc., which to his credit actually worked most of the time, and just all sorts of things. He wasn't a bad guy, really, and some of the weird stuff about him was related to him absolutely hating bigotry. Most of the popular kids in the school were racist/homophobic, and would fly Confederate flags on their lockers and stuff like that. This was in a blue state, very blue area. And he just had the habit of snatching the flags down and trashing them, or call other kids out on racist stuff, and be willing to back it up physically, which seemed pretty uncharacteristic of him otherwise. Then one day he just disappeared in senior year, and never came back to school. It turned out the guy was completely playing us all. He disappeared in 2001, before social media, and since he had no friends or relatives at that school, nobody knew what happened to him. A few years later, coincidentally, our friend groups converged due to a friend of mine dating a friend of his, and I ended up bull-crapping with him at the bar. It turns out the guy was mostly normal, actually pretty cool, but he had wicked social anxiety outside of his close friends, which turned out to be from another school on the other side of town, that he had met at work rather than at our school. Hanging out with them was what changed him to his punk/goth sort of style, but that really wasn't a thing at our school, so the other kids still gave him shit for it. Eventually, he realized that instead of trying to win them over, he could try to just repulse them so they'd leave him alone, and it worked. Turns out most of the gross stuff he did was stage, like the cheese thing, which was actually in his pocket in a plastic bag with a hole he cut in his pocket to allow him to grab it as if he had it in his drawers. The anti-bigotry thing turned out to be the real him, though. He just had no patience for that stuff. When he disappeared, he was actually having issues at home with his parents, especially his father, who was horribly abusive for most of his life. It turns out that he was already 18, and because of how poor his home and school life was, chose to secretly enlist in the military and told nobody until the day before he had to report to basic training. He then went to the school office that morning, pulled himself out of school, went home, packed his bag, said goodbye to his friends, and went home just in time for his recruiter to pick him up before his parents got home. Some years later, experimenting with drugs somehow managed to help him with his anxiety, and he wound up being a pretty kick, but dude who I'm friends with now. One kid wore sunglasses indoors 24/7 and claimed his eyes were too powerful. Had ringworm for a really long time. Lived with older grandparents who didn't really understand how to treat it. We were friendly before that, but the teachers had us all sit further from him and avoid touching him because they didn't want to spread like crazy, and that just turned him into an outcast, and we started to grow apart. I think one of the teachers finally had to make a house visit, and eventually the ringworm cleared up, but by then the damage was done, and worse rumors spread. I still think about him often. Last I heard, he wrote a children's book about uplifting kids who are different. I hope he's doing well. I had a kid at my high school that came to school every single day dressed as Link from Legend of Zelda, sword and everything. Everyone knew him. However, for some reason, he got along great with everyone. In the hallways, I always saw people giving him high fives, saying hello, all sorts of stuff. Against all odds, he seemed insanely popular with every person in the school. One girl started her period in class and told everyone her horse gave birth, and she didn't have time to change clothes before coming to school. She was our resident horse girl, and she didn't have a horse. All he did was have the first name Irwin, and then some kid in class decided his name sounded like Earthworm. From that point forward, that's all we called him. He was perfectly normal prior to this, but then eventually, after a while, he began to act weirder and weirder until eventually he was taken away by police in junior high school after a fight with another kid. We never saw him again after that. I feel really bad for him every time I think about it. There was a kid at my school used to carry around a pillow to sit on in class, like a full-size bed pillow, and it was filthy as well. He must have slept on it at night as well as I had that yellowy/orange color to it. Almost looked like a massive pastry. He left it in English class and were the next class to be in. He came in about 10 minutes into the lesson, burst through the door without knocking, and was frantically searching for this pillow, walking around throwing people's bags around, saying over and over, "Where's my pillow?" like a scatty mum that's lost her cigs. He found it and dragged it out from wherever someone had hidden it and cuddled it like teddy bear while what looked like hyperventilating. The heaviest breathing. Poor kid. Thing is, apart from the pillow thing, he was a completely normal kid. Poor guy wasn't allowed to forget about that for a while. wore a bathrobe and a spork above his ear for a year.